So in this demo, we're going to cover a typical workflow for virtual reality and 360 live streaming. So with Wowza technology, it enables you to live stream 360 and virtual reality video content through either the Wowza Streaming Cloud or Wowza Streaming Engine, which allows you to reach really global audiences with high quality immersive video experiences. With our software, we can support up to 4K resolution. We have various compatible video stitching software and encoders and cameras. And of course, with our future-proof technology, it allows you to use any of these workflows. So we're going to walk through today a couple of these. Now, just to give you a quick overview of exactly what we're going to do, what we have here is we have a gyroptic 360 camera. We also have an Intel NUC, which we're using as a local server here to actually process the stream coming off of this gyroptic. And Wowza is running on this little machine, and it's actually, you can either transcode or you can repackage it to multiple resolutions. And then what we're doing is we're actually using a mobile device to view the playback of this stream. So to show you kind of the steps that are involved here, and I'm going to do a quick overview and then actually jump into a deep dive onto how to actually do this. So we have this particular gyroptic camera that we've set up, and you can see here, this is the feed coming directly off of VLC media player. This is the gyroptic cam. It has 3 cameras. It's stitching it together, and it's actually then sending that out over the RTSP protocol. Now, if I switch this over to Wowza, here is Wowza running on this little server. And what if I go into my live applications and come into my incoming streams, I've created a connection to that same RTSP address on my local network here. So if I open up the stream, you can see it's coming in at 4 megabits per second. If I click on test players, now I can view this over different protocols. So even though it's coming over RTSP, I can now repackage this into multiple resolution or multiple protocols. So this is Adobe RTMP. I can do Adobe HDS. And then I can also pull up this HLS URL and be able to pull this up in a browser like Safari, and I could view the stream there as well. So you can see here it is in Safari. And there's that stream coming off of the 360 camera. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to use this HLS URL and then be able to pull that up on my mobile device. So in here I'm actually using a tool called Reflector to reflect my screen, and this will allow you to see exactly what I'm seeing. So you can see here I have it open. We're partnering with a company called Nex Player, and they've created this 360 player. And the great thing about this player is that it allows you to pull that HLS URL, or if you're on an Android device, an RTSP URL, and be able to view that. So here I've pulled this up. I've already pulled in the URL. I'm going to open that up. And now what you'll notice is it's actually playing this stream directly on my mobile device. The great thing about this is I can move it around with my hands and be able to do it, or I could use my finger and actually view this. And you can see there I am. There's my home office, and here you can see everything that's coming off of that 360 camera that I'm controlling with my finger. Now the great thing about this player is that you can actually go into vertical mode. So there's the vertical mode. I can now do that. I can go back to horizontal and very easily see all of this that's coming off of the 360 camera. So this is one implementation. This is a player that you can use for iOS and Android devices. It makes it very easy to pull in this stream coming off of Wowza. And then you could also send this to a CDN, so you could scale this with a CDN as well and be able to do that, to scale it to a larger audience. And Wowza Streaming Cloud allows you to do that. So with Wowza Streaming Cloud, you can in fact grab this stream from this gyroptic camera and then be able to restream that out to a large audience using a CDN as a backbone. Or like I'm doing here, even though this is a local environment, I could use my own Wowza server and then push to Wowza Streaming Cloud or another CDN to deliver this to users globally. Alright, so I'll go ahead and jump back into the presentation here. One other thing that you can do is that you can use a protocol like HLS or even MPEG-, and you can then deliver that using an HTML5 player on your website. So using a player like BitDash has a 360 player that allows you to do it, and JW Player also has a player that they're working on that's in beta that will allow you to pull in an HLS URL and be able to play that back in a 360 environment on a page, and that will allow you to click on that with your mouse and of course move that around. So I'm going to kind of talk through the workflow here a little bit. You can see here on this Wowza machine, I can see the usage, the amount of connections that I've had when I've been doing this demo. But what I'll do, I'll jump into a presentation and then we'll come back in and walk through all of the individual steps that are involved here. So the typical workflow here is you can see that we have the 360 camera or a rig. This could be multiple GoPros or multiple cameras. They're all being pulled together through a capture device. And then in this typical workflow, you would have to use a stitching software like Video Stitch Vahana VR software that will allow you to pull in all these different camera feeds and then stitch them together and then send that into a streaming server like Wowza for delivery to end users. Usually the connection here is RTMP. In this use case, these different cameras have to be captured through either HDMI or SDI capture cards. And there are a few options there that I'll go through. Now what Wowza is able to do is take in this RTMP feed, or it could be an RTSP, some kind of a streaming protocol, and we can take in resolutions up to 4K that are stitched together from the software, and then restream that out to users. This could be tablets, this could be mobile devices like we just showed, even headsets, or even record this at the server and store this for later use for video on demand. This is an example of a simple camera rig. So in this case, there are 4 GoPro cameras. Now what happens here though is that how do you acquire this signal and how do you stitch it together? With this particular example, you need to use capture devices like these Magewell capture devices. So Magewell makes a USB capture that you can capture it via HDMI and then pull it in through through USB 3 into your laptop or your desktop computer. But however, for every one camera that you have, you need one of these devices to capture it. So if you're doing 4 cameras, 6 cameras, 8 cameras, you need 8 of these devices and 8 ports to capture the USB content as well. So that requires kind of a more robust machine to be able to do that. Another option is you can use a Magewell capture device, a capture card like this that has up to 4 inputs, and you could put multiple capture cards inside of a server or a desktop or a more robust workstation to be able to capture all this. The additional layer you need here is now you've captured these different cameras, but you need some software to stitch it all together. And that's where Video Stitch Vahana VR software allows you to pull in all those feeds and do that. Here's an example of another camera rig, this one of course being a little bit more expensive. These are Red Pros that are then stitched together in really high intensity machine that can process this resolution. And then here's one of 16 GoPros. So you see these camera rigs that are being created now for different use cases. In this case, of course, this is a pretty expensive workflow with up to 16 cameras. And of course, having 16 different capture devices from mini HDMI to HDMI, capturing it somehow, and then of course, stitching that all together. So that creates a little bit of a pain point. Some of the hardware pain points here is that you have a lack of hardware synchronization across different cameras. You can have a lot of HDMI cables. So with the GoPro scenario, you have mini HDMI to HDMI. You have these Magewell capture devices. You need to power them all. This can be a little bit daunting to try to create a rig that can do this all. And you may have an issue with overheating. With running so much hardware, so many cameras at the same time, it can overheat the rig. And then of course you need a dedicated card or dedicated capture devices for acquiring that video signal, which can also be a pain point and can be sometimes cost prohibitive. So there's a few options out there for different workflows. Video Stitch has recognized this. They've come out with this Aura device that will be shipping in June of 2016. And this allows you to use these 4 different cameras up to 4K resolution and be able to stitch it together on the stitching box. So it pulls in the signal here over a PoE, it powers the device, it pulls the data signal from these 4 cameras, and then this particular device will stitch them all together. So this particular stitching box will have Vahana running on it, pre-configured automatically to acquire the signal and stitch it together from the VR camera. And I believe this Aura device is going to be in the range of about $2,000 US. This is an example, a screenshot of the Vahana software. So in this example, we have 6 different camera feeds. Now in this one, we have pre-recorded MP4s, as you can see, and we're able to then stitch all those together in post-production. But there is a workflow here that can be live. You can acquire this all through a live signal using capture devices like the Magewell capture card or hardware device. And then you can stitch it together, you can crop it, you can really get this configured how you want, and then push the stream out over RTMP as a streaming protocol into the Wowza server, either Wowza Streaming Engine or Wowza Streaming Cloud, we can take in the RTMP and then repackage that and scale that for delivery out to end users. And this is exactly that workflow. So in this workflow with the VideoStitch Aura device, here's the Aura device at H.264 with AAC audio. It's acquiring this signal through RTSP over that PoE connection. This is Vahana running on that stitching box, and then it's stitching it all together and then sending that over RTMP into Wowza. And then of course we can then transcode that to multiple different resolutions and also repackage it to multiple different protocols. So why would you do this? Well, the reason we would actually transcode that is we're taking in that 4K signal, but that may not be a signal that at a higher resolution, that could be up to 8 megabit, 10 megabit per second or more. You know, there are devices that maybe don't have the bandwidth to play that back. So what Wowza can do is we can actually transcode this either on your local server or in the cloud to multiple different resolutions and bit rates to deliver adaptive bit rate. So you can deliver a much lower end resolution, maybe to a device that's on 3G. And then we can also repackage that to Apple HLS or MPEG-Dash for delivery across different devices and support across different devices, including, you know, laptops, desktops, mobile devices, and so on. This is the demo that I'm actually doing today. So here I have the gyro-optic camera. This is a device that actually has 3 cameras and it puts out a signal of 2K. So if I look at my VLC media player, in here you can see is my media information for this in VLC. If I look at the codec details, it's coming in at 2048 by 1024. So this allows me, this is at 25 frames per second is what I have it configured at. You can see here the details there. This particular signal I have it configured to come in at 4 megabits per second. But the great thing about this little device actually does the stitching directly on the box. So the stitching is done directly on here, and then I've added this optional component which is a PoE. It enables the power over Ethernet and the Ethernet connection, and I'll walk through that in just a little bit, that it allows me to acquire this and live stream this directly from the device. There's also another option. Teradek is making the Teradek Sphere. This allows you to use kind of the industry proven technology of Teradek, but then also have a workflow for being able to acquire up to 4 different cameras. And you can even daisy chain these together, so you can connect them to do not just 4 but even 8 cameras and be able to do that. And they're able to do the live stitching on an iOS device or even on OS X, be able to take in 4 HDMI inputs, or like I said, daisy chain it to 8 cameras. It's camera agnostic, and this is really where the benefit is. You can use very high-end cameras that can output HDMI, GoPros, or much higher-end cameras to do it. You can do real-time color calibration, white balancing, lens calibration, and so on. And you can record on your iOS device as well, or on OS X. And this will be priced at $3,000. The gyro-optic device itself is actually available, I think, in the range of $500 for the device, and then the PoE switch is about $275. So the entire rig to be able to do live streaming is about $775. And then what we're using for the player itself, like in the demo I just showed, we're using NextPlayer. And NextPlayer is one that's great for iOS and Android for mobile devices. They have an SDK available that you can then build into your own app. So they built this version, this app for us for use here in the demo, but what you would do is purchase the SDK from them and then of course embed that into your own app. And this allows you to really insert Wowza, insert a 360 camera, and have the entire workflow from start to finish on how to do that. For playback inside of an HTML5 environment, so on your website, let's say, you could use either JW Player has a 360 player or BitDash. Those are 2 options for playing it. And BitDash is a BitDash 360 player that, of course, will do that over Dash, and I believe HLS as well. So with that, let's go ahead and walk through a full demo from start to finish on how to connect this device. So I'm going to come into my live application, and what I'm going to do is actually disconnect the existing stream that I have in here. So you can see if I pull this up in my incoming streams, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this particular URL. And what I'm going to do is start right from the very beginning. So I'm going to come into the device itself. You can see here it currently says live, but I'm going to unplug the actual Ethernet cable here at the back. and that will recycle power to this device. Now what I'll show you from start to finish is the local configuration I have here. So I have just a local router here. It's a very simple router with a wireless signal, and I'm using the wireless for my mobile device so I can connect to it and be able to view that on here. So I have kind of three connections here. I have my little NUC here, that Intel NUC that's running Wowza streaming engine, and that's going to acquire the signal and then process it and transcode and repackage it to multiple resolutions and protocols. And then I have the actual gyro-optic camera that's attached to this as well. Now what we have here is this PoE switch, and PoE is power over Ethernet. I have an Ethernet cable here connected to the router, and I have this powered. And what this cable does when it connects to the camera, not only does it power the camera, it also will pass the data along through the cable. So it's doing that all through here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to plug this in, and this is going to power the device. And what I want you to see here is I want you to see it's going to start powering up. It's telling me 360. And you'll see here it's going to acquire an IP address from the router itself, and as soon as it connects, it's going to tell me the IP address. The great thing about this PoE addition here is that it will permit me to actually live stream it. So now you can tell it's telling me it's live, and now here in just a second it's going to give me the IP address of what it's found on the router. You can give it a static IP or a dynamic IP. I currently have it set as dynamic, and I have just a very narrow IP range that I'm using to grab this. So as soon as I see this on here, there are a couple of buttons that allow you to kind of access the different menus, but as soon as it finishes here, I'll be able to acquire this and then be able to see that that signal in VLC. So you can see now it's telling me the IP address is .102, so 196.168.0.102. If I look here in VLC, I believe that's the address I already had up. So you can see it had given me an error because I had turned it off. If I pull this back up again, you can see here if I actually pause this, I'm going to go to Open Network, and right here is the URL. So you can see the IP address is 192.168.0.102. Now what you'll notice is this is coming in over RTSP, and this is the syntax that you have to use to acquire the video signal. And this is, every IP camera has a different kind of syntax they use, but this is telling me the port number, port 8557, and then here's the syntax that I'm using to acquire the signal. So it's PSIA/streaming/channels/2, and then it's !, video codec type equals H.264, and that's the codec that's being used to encode this signal directly on the device. So if I actually copy this, I can then put that inside of Wowza to acquire the signal as well. If I click on Open, I can see the signal here playing inside of VLC. If I go to full screen, now you can actually see this playing, and you can see me here in real time as I wave at the camera. You can see the signal. And what you can see with the gyro-optic camera is you can see at times a little bit the stitching depending on where the cameras happen to lie, the seams of this. You can adjust this of course by moving the camera itself, and that can actually maybe fix the whatever seams you're having inside of the stream. So if I look here, once again, I can look at the media information. So if I look at the media information in here, here are the codec details. It's coming at 2048 by 1024 at 25 frames per second. If I jump back into Wowza, what I want to do now is connect to this camera. And the way we do that, we can come into a live application. So I'm going to click on Applications, click on Live, and then here under Stream Files, I can click on Add a Stream File. Now when I do this, here I can enter the name of this, so I can do gyro-optic. You can see I already have one named, and here is where I type in the stream URI, and this is the one that I just mentioned and I pulled up in VLC. And this is available, each camera manufacturer has this available on their website, so if you go to Gyro-Optic Support Forum, they'll provide this to you to be able to acquire the signal. Of course the IP address will be different depending if it's a local IP or a public IP or out on the public internet. So I've done that already. I'll show you here. I'll edit. Here's that URI that I've pulled in with the IP address. Click on Save. And now what I want to do is I want to come back to my stream files and I want to connect to it. So the requirement here is that your server you have to tell it where to acquire the signal from. The difference here is if you use another encoder, sometimes it does RTMP, and it's up to the encoder to push to a server. In the case of an RTSP, or what's common with IP cameras, is that it will put out an RTSP signal across the network, and it's the responsibility of the server to pull the signal from the IP camera. And that's what we're doing here. So when I connect to this, I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to connect it to the default instance for this live application. Hit OK, and now when I come back into my incoming streams, I'll see the signal. I can see here it's active. And if I pull this up, it's going to tell me the bit rate this is coming in at. So I'm pulling that signal now over RTSP from this camera. It's coming in at 4 megabits per second. And like I showed previously, I can click on test players, I can click on start, and I can actually see here the output. I can go full screen just like I can in VLC, and this is being repackaged to RTMP on the Wowza server. And as you can see, the signal here is pretty good. I mean, these cameras actually put out a pretty decent resolution. Gyroptic is definitely the most affordable product on the market, and it's definitely a great way to get started with 360 live streaming. Once again, I can now look at this over different protocols. I can do this over Dash, I can do this over Adobe HDS, multiple different protocols that allow me to do that in here. And like I mentioned previously, I can do this also using Apple HLS. If I actually maximize this to full screen, here you can see if I click on play, it's going to show me this live broadcast over HLS as well. Now the thing to note is with any HTTP protocol, there is latency involved, and you can see here there's about 20 seconds of latency with Apple HLS. There are ways that you can configure your live application to lower that, so you can come in and change the chunk sizes to lower chunk sizes, and there's additional things you can do to reduce the latency. But the great thing with a couple of the players that are out there is you can serve this up over RTSP. So the limitation there is you're limited by what devices can interpret the RTSP protocol. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you're looking to do kind of real-time in-venue type use case, you would want to use RTSP either directly from the device or use a Wowza server to scale that to a few. The other thing that I'll show you now is, I've pulled this in, we're repackaging it. I'm going to pull up the app one more time. And what I want to show you here, I'm going to go ahead and connect to this once again. I'm going to AirPlay my screen. And there you can see it. And what I want to show you in the app when I pull this up is, yes, I can view the stream like we did previously, and I can use my finger, or I can actually move the device around. But what I want to show you is this next player actually has a stereoscopic mode as well, which is pretty cool. So there I am. If I want to see myself in stereoscopic, I can now click this button right here, go into stereoscopic mode, and now I can use these kind of Google Cardboard classes to be able to put it on. So we created these at Wowza. I can now put this directly inside the Google Cardboard, and now I can actually view this myself and pan around and be able to see this all inside of here. And you guys can see what I'm seeing right now on the screen. So this permits me to actually do a true stereoscopic environment using this Next Player app. And that's one of the great things about it, is you can use kind of more high-end glasses if you want. These Wowza ones are of course Google Cardboard, but you could get higher-end glasses to create a more immersive experience. So a couple of different modes here. So that's one of the things I really like about Next Player, is that it gives you the option here. You can do vertical, you can do horizontal, and you can move it around. There's a lot of different options, so makes it really easy. And that's really the workflow from start to finish of kind of the 360 workflow using this gyroptic camera. The workflow is somewhat similar using other cameras, but they're all slightly different. Of course, with Video Stitch, with Aura, it requires you to have that stitching box and use that. You can use Video Stitch Vahana independent of Aura, so they still sell the software if you want to bring your own rig and be able to do that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. If you guys want more information, you can go wowza.com. We have a section on virtual reality and 360 streaming. And then if you go to wowza.com/VR360, here we actually have the information to download the Next Player 360 app. So if you want to download either the Android app or the iOS app, you can do that. And there's a username and a password to be able to use that for iOS and Android. And that will allow you to kind of get the workflow going that we have created here with Wowza with gyroptic with another 360 camera, and then of course using the Next Player 360 app as well.